Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on U.S. immigration. It's incredibly complex, often challenging. Our goal here is to help you understand what's happening right now, the different ways people navigate the system, and, how these policies really impact people and the economy. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a huge topic, absolutely. And it affects millions of people directly. The whole system is constantly changing, and it has these massive ripple effects for the entire country. Understanding the sheer scale, the human side of it, is key.
Right. So let's start with the numbers. What's the current state of play? The data shows? Well, it shows a record-breaking backlog. We're talking 11.3 million pending cases as of July 2025. That's just enormous.
It really is. And it's not just the size of the backlog.
No.
The speed of processing seems to be an issue, too. The USCIS, that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they processed about 2.7 million cases from January to March this year. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually down from 3.3 million for the same time last year.
A noticeable drop. What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, behind those numbers are real people waiting.
Yeah.
Experts are, frankly, quite concerned. They don't see processing times speeding up much under the current administration. Some are even saying that consular processing that's handling applications through embassies abroad is, and this is a quote, grinding to a halt.
Grinding to a halt? Wow. That means huge uncertainty for families, for workers.
Exactly. Immense uncertainty, really long waits, impacting everything: work, study, family reunification.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting, I think. What about past approaches to enforcement? What can we learn looking back? Thinking about, say, the strategies under the previous administration, often called Trump 1.0, we saw some very aggressive tactics.
Definitely. Aggressive and expansive.
Like the 287G agreements, there was a huge jump there, right? Over 260% increase.
Yes, exactly. Those 287G agreements basically let local police act like federal immigration agents. It really blurred the line. So you have people being arrested based on their immigration status by local cops, not necessarily for, serious crimes.
And that wasn't the only thing. There were secure communities, too.
Right. Secure communities was another big one. It meant fingerprints from local arrests were shared with federal immigration with ICE. This led to a lot of deportations, sometimes for very minor offenses, because ICE could easily identify people who were undocumented.
And workplace enforcement, the worksite raids.
Oh yeah, that ramped up significantly. Between late 2017 and mid-2018, ICE did about 60% more employer audits than the year before. Over 1,100 undocumented workers were arrested in those audits. And these weren't just in big cities. Small rural towns saw mass arrests too, sometimes over 100 people in one go.
You also mentioned something called collateral arrests. What were those?
Yes, that's a really crucial piece. Collateral arrests meant agents weren't just arresting the people they initially targeted. If other undocumented individuals were simply present during an operation, maybe at the same house or workplace, they could be arrested too.
So it just broadened the net massively.
Hugely. And you see it in the numbers. Interior removals deportations from inside the U.S. of people without criminal convictions nearly tripled between fiscal year 2016 and 2017. It jumped from about 5,000 to almost 14,000.
Just so. Wow. And looking forward, what are the potential implications if similar or maybe even more aggressive approaches were taken again?
Well, based on discussions and reports around a potential Trump 2.0, the strategies could become even more aggressive. Things like ending enforcement prioritization altogether. That means anyone without legal status could potentially be a target for removal, regardless of background or ties.
No more prioritizing serious criminals, for instance.
Potentially, yes. Also terminating existing parole processes, which allow certain groups temporary entry, and potentially loosening the rules about enforcement in places usually considered protected.
Like schools, hospitals.
Exactly. Schools, hospitals, places of worship, places traditionally seen as safe zones might not be. There's also been talk of suing states with sanctuary policies limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement.
And invoking the Alien Enemies Act. That sounds old and serious.
It is very old, 1798. And yes, very serious. It's typically used only in declared wars. It could potentially let the president detain or deport non-citizens from nations deemed hostile with less due process than usual. It's an extreme measure.
Using that would signal a major shift, wouldn't it, towards something much more militarized?
Absolutely. A much more centralized, potentially militarized approach. The impact on communities, on state-federal relations, it would be profound.
You can really see how that kind of environment could create a lot of fear and instability.
Immense fear. It fractures families, pushes people into the shadows, disrupts local economies, and it can seriously damage trust between communities and law enforcement, which isn't good for anyone's safety.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the goal for many immigrants, getting a green card. That's the popular name for the permanent resident card, right? Allows people to live and work in the U.S. permanently. Comes from the old green color, I guess.
That's right. And there are quite a few people who hold them. The estimate for 2024 is around 12.8 million green card holders. And nearly 9 million of those are actually eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship.
So how do people get one? What are the main routes?
Well, there are several main pathways. Family is a big one. U.S. citizens can sponsor their spouses, kids, parents, even siblings. And permanent residents themselves, LPRs, can sponsor their spouses and unmarried children. Then there's employment. Visas for skilled workers, professionals with advanced degrees, investors, people with extraordinary abilities.
They're like Nobel Prize winners.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Or top athletes, artists. Then there's the diversity visa lottery. The green card lottery. That's for people from countries that don't send many immigrants here usually. And finally, some special categories. Religious workers, victims of trafficking or certain crimes, and something called registry.
Registry. Tell me about that one. Sounds a bit different.
It is quite different. It's an older part of the law, not used that often now because the requirements are so specific. Basically, it allows someone who has lived in the U.S. for a very, very long time, even if they entered without permission initially, to get a green card if they meet strict criteria like continuous residence and good moral character. But the key thing is, the law was last updated way back in 1986, and the cutoff date to qualify is January 1st, 1972.
1972. So you'd have to prove you've been living here continuously since before then.
Exactly. Which means it applies to very few people today.
Got it. Okay, so for these more common pathways like family or employment, what's the actual application process like? Step by step.
Generally, it's a three-step dance. First, someone files an immigrant petition for you. That's usually Form I-130 for family or I-140 for employment. That establishes your eligibility. Second, and this is often the long part, you need an immigrant visa number to become available. Unless you're an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen like a spouse or young child, you go into a queue. The National Visa Center manages this based on quotas and your priority date, usually when the initial petition was filed. This is where the backlogs really build up.
Right, the waiting lists.
Yep.
And the third step?
The third step is getting the actual visa or green card approved. If you're already in the U.S. legally, you might file for adjustment of status using Form I-45. If you're outside the U.S., you go through consular processing at a U.S. embassy or consulate abroad.
And while people are stuck in these long waits, especially if they're already here, can they work or travel?
Yes. Often they can get temporary permits while waiting for the final green card decision, assuming they filed for adjustment of status. There's the EAD, the Employment Authorization Document, which lets them work legally, and advanced parole, which lets them travel internationally without abandoning their green card application. These are lifelines for many people during the process.
Good to know. Any recent changes to the process itself?
Yeah, a couple things. The medical exam, Form I-693, used to be valid indefinitely once signed by the doctor. Now its validity is tied specifically to the application it's filed with, so timing matters more. Also, for marriage-based green cards, they've brought back mandatory in-person interviews more consistently, and there's reportedly more scrutiny of social media accounts now looking for red flags.
Okay, so we've mentioned the backlogs. Let's dive into that because it seems to be a huge bottleneck, the backlog crisis, as some call it. You hear about people waiting decades, especially for employment-based green cards if they're from certain countries, right?
Absolutely. Decades is not an exaggeration. The annual limit for all employment-based green cards is only 140,000 worldwide. And crucially, that number includes spouses and children, not just the primary workers. Plus, there's a per-country cap. No single country can receive more than 7% of the total visas in a given category each year.
And that hits countries with large populations sending skilled workers hardest, like India, China.
Precisely. India, China, and the Philippines are particularly affected in the employment categories. The scale is just staggering. As of November 2023, estimates suggest over 1 million Indian nationals are waiting in the main employment-based backlogs, EB1, EB2, EB3. If you include their dependent family members, it's closer to 1.25 million people.
1.25 million, just from India in those
It's
countries.
just from India. And some projections are dire. The Congressional Research Service estimated that backlog for Indians could hit 2.2 million by 2030. They calculated it could take, get this, 195 years to clear the existing backlog at current rates.
195 years. That's essentially a lifetime ban for many.
Yeah, it effectively is. For comparison, look at the May 2024 Visa Bulletin. For the EB2 category, that's often professionals with advanced degrees, the cutoff date for Indian applicants was May 15, 2012, meaning they were processing applications filed before that date. For Chinese applicants in the same category, it was June 1st, 2020. Still a wait, but much shorter.
8 years difference just based on country of birth.
And for people from most other countries, the date was February 15th, 2023. So you see the huge disparity caused by those per-country limits.
These aren't just abstract numbers. They represent real lives stuck in limbo. I read about Roshan Tyrol.
Oh, his story is heartbreaking. And unfortunately, quite illustrative of the system's challenges.
Came here at 10 years old with his parents from India in 2008. His mother's employer sponsored her for a green card back in 2010.
Right. But because of those low caps and the per-country limits, she was still waiting years later.
And then, tragically, she passed away in 2018, still waiting.
Still waiting. And because she passed away, Roshan then aged out when he turned 21. He was no longer eligible as her dependent child.
Even though he grew up here, went to Boston College, works in a critical field, semiconductors.
Right, high demand field. But he couldn't get an H-1B work visa after trying the lottery 3 times. So now, despite living in the U.S. since childhood, he's facing having to leave.
It's incredibly tough. And it's not just people who came as kids. What about Collie Greenwood, the CEO of MARTA in Atlanta?
Another stark example. A Canadian citizen, highly skilled executive leading a major transit agency. He had to resign because his work permit expired while he was still waiting for his green card approval. Even though apparently it was considered imminent, the delays cost of his job. These are high-profile examples, but they reflect the reality for many.
And what about the wider economic fallout from these kinds of backlogs and enforcement fears?
Oh, the economic impacts are significant and widespread. You see later shortages in key sectors like agriculture, construction, hospitality industries that often rely heavily on immigrant labor. This can slow growth, push up prices. It affects housing too. An estimated 1.2 million households rely on income from at least one undocumented member. If that earner is deported, families face instability.
Foreclosures even.
Yes, studies have shown higher foreclosure rates, particularly for Latino households, in areas with those 287G enforcement partnerships.
Yeah.
Almost 70% higher in some cases.
And the impact on kids, especially U.S. citizen kids.
That's a huge concern. Millions of U.S. citizen children, estimates range from 4.1 to 5.7 million, have at least one undocumented parent. The fear and reality of enforcement affects their education. We see drops in school enrollment, like a nearly 10% dip in Latino student enrollment, where 287G agreements were implemented.
Wow. And their well-being.
It takes a toll. Lower academic performance, significant mental health issues. One survey found over half of high school students met the criteria for PTSD because of the fear surrounding enforcement.
PTSD from fear of immigration enforcement.
Yes. And economically, families hit by detention or deportation see huge income drops anywhere from 19% to nearly 50% reduction in median household income. Plus, increased food insecurity. It's a cycle of hardship.
It paints a really grim picture. So given all this, what's being proposed? What are the potential solutions on the table to fix these waits and lessen these impacts?
Well, there are legislative ideas floating around.
Right, like Senator Alex Padilla's bill trying to update that registry provision we talked about.
Exactly. The Renewing Immigration Provisions of the Immigration Act of 1929 bill. The core idea is simple. Update that 1972 date. The bill proposes changing the requirement from continuous residence since 1972 to continuous residence for at least 7 years. Still need good moral character, of course.
7 years instead of over 50. That would make a huge difference. Who could potentially benefit?
A lot of people. Estimates suggest maybe up to 8 million individuals could potentially qualify over time. This could include dreamers, people with temporary protected status, TPS, kids of long-term visa holders who risk aging out, many essential workers, even H-1B workers, stuck in those long green card lines.
And the economic upside.
Potentially significant. One estimate suggests bringing these individuals fully into the system could add $83 billion annually to the U.S. economy and generate $27 billion in taxes each year.
There's a companion bill in the House, too.
Yes, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren is sponsoring it in the House.
Yeah.
But, despite the logic and potential benefits, and even the fact that updating registry used to be bipartisan.
It faces an uphill battle politically.
Very much so. Immigration experts are pretty skeptical about its chances of passing in the current political climate.
Yep.
Immigration reform is just incredibly contentious right now.
That makes sense. And related to reform, what about the debate over those per-country caps for green cards? You hear different arguments?
Absolutely. It's a key point of contention. On one side, you have advocates, often from the tech industry and groups representing Indian and Chinese nationals, arguing to eliminate the caps. Their point is that it's fundamentally unfair for someone's wait time to be determined by their country of birth, rather than their qualifications or filing date. They argue for a more first-come, first-served, or purely merit-based system.
Okay, so fairness based on individual merit. What's the counter-argument?
The counter-argument often emphasizes diversity. Supporters of the caps worry that removing them would lead to just one or two countries, like India due to the sheer size of its backlog, dominating the available employment-based green cards for years. They argue the caps ensure immigrants from a wider range of countries have a chance to come, maintaining diversity in the immigrant flow. It's a genuine debate with valid points on both sides about what constitutes fairness and serves U.S. interests best.
So different ideas of fairness, really, and our job is just to lay out those different perspectives, not pick a side.
Precisely, just presenting the arguments being made.
Now, for people who are already permanent residents, already on the path, there are rules about maintaining that status, right? Especially if they want to become citizens eventually.
Yes, absolutely. For naturalization, becoming a citizen, you need to show continuous residence for a certain period, usually 3 or 5 years, depending on how you got your green card. Spending too much time outside the U.S. can break that continuity.
But what if you have to work abroad for a U.S. company or the government?
There's a provision for that. You can file Form N-470, Application to Preserve Residence for Naturalization Purposes. This basically asks USCIS to recognize your time abroad as not breaking your continuous residence if you're in specific qualifying employment, like for the U.S. government or an American research institution or a U.S. firm engaged in foreign trade.
So it pauses the clock, essentially.
It preserves the continuity of residence, yes. But, and this is important, it usually doesn't count towards the physical presence requirement for naturalization, which is being physically in the U.S. for at least half the required residency period.
Unless you're working for the government.
Right. There are exceptions for U.S. government employees and some religious workers where N-470 can preserve both. It's nuanced.
And briefly, what about conditional residency? That's a thing too, right?
Yes. For people who get green cards based on a marriage that's less than 2 years old or through certain investment routes, they get a conditional green card valid for only 2 years. Before it expires, they have to file another form, I-751 for marriage-based, I-829 for investors, to prove the marriage is legitimate or the investment criteria are still met. Then they get the conditions removed and receive a standard 10-year green card.
So another layer of process there. It's just amazing how all these different rules and processes and backlogs weave together.
It really is a complex web. And measures like N-470 or removing conditions help people who are already in the system maintain their status. But they don't address the fundamental systemic challenges, the huge backlogs and processing delays facing new applicants trying to get in.
So summing up our deep dive today, we've really looked at the U.S. immigration system from several angles. We talked about the immense backlogs and the slowdown in processing. We touched on past enforcement strategies and potential future shifts. We outlined the main pathways to getting a green card, but then dug into the harsh reality of the backlog crisis, hearing stories like Roshan Tural's.
Yeah, and we discussed the economic ripple effects of these delays in enforcement actions, labor shortages, housing impacts, the toll on families and children.
And finally, we looked at some potential reforms, like the Registry Act update, and the ongoing debates around things like per-country caps, alongside the ways current residents maintain their status.
I think a key takeaway is just how interconnected immigration policy is with everything else, the economy, labor, community well-being. Finding solutions really needs a balanced approach, looking at both, enforcement and creating viable, efficient pathways.
It's a conversation that definitely needs to continue. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. All the best, and we will meet again with another important matter again.